So, our Vietnam story this week is of an American soldier and Vietnamese girl finding lost love after 50 years. And they put this on, I've seen it on Vietnam pages, and people have been talking about it. And of course, reactions have been, oh, it's so wonderful. Okay, we've got this soldier from the Vietnam era who came back after 50 years to see his old lost love, and they got back together, and he met her at the airport and brought her a dozen roses and apologized to her, and they shared like you remember Lost in Translation, like the whispering, like nobody knows what they were saying together, but they were in tears and they were hugging and they were talking, and it became celebrated as this big romantic thing. And now, as a disclaimer, before I get into my whole cynical take on what happened between these two people, let me just say that I don't know exactly. I don't know how it is to go 50 years or whatever, and I don't really know what's in their hearts, but I only know the facts that are given to us from this article, and I just wanted to break them down a little bit so we understand what's going on here, and why I personally do not find it very romantic. Even though it is kind of a sweet scene, there's a sweet picture of them holding each other and embracing and regretting lost times and everything. But just comparing it to my life and who I would be in that situation and what it might look 50 years from now if something like this happens again, I just want to give you some thoughts. So this soldier, his name is Ken, what's his last name? Ken Reesing, an American soldier. He came back to meet, what's her name? Lan, what's her last name? Anyway, her name is Lan, and his name is Ken. And Ken was a soldier stationed in Vietnam during the American War. I call it the American War now because that's frankly what it was. And he met her at a bar, I guess. She would go to the club, the EM Club in 1969, and they show a picture of her. She was 17 years old, and according to the article, all the soldiers would flirt with her, but he was the one that broke through. He's the one that she liked. He's the one that his lines worked on her and everything, and they fell in love, right? They fell in love. I'm not sure what that means. But they fell in love, and they were together, and then at the end of his tour, so at the end of his term, he decided that he was going to come back for her no matter what, and so they went to the post office together, and he bought a box with 100 stamped envelopes, and he said, okay, or 50 stamped envelopes, and he said, as soon as you finish writing these 50 letters, I will come back. And he thought it would take her a year or something, but anyway, she was able to get through all 50 envelopes. She sent him 50 letters over the span of 3 months, and she kept writing. But then, he could not come back as promised, according to the article, and in 1973 they lost touch. He decided to keep writing her letters to the club after the war was over, but they weren't able to find each other. And so after he had finished writing after she had finished writing the letters, he eventually gave up, and it just broke his heart. And in 1973, it was harder to find people on social media. Well, we didn't have social media and all that. The people didn't have social media. And so they lost touch, and he ended up getting married, and she got married too, but later on she got divorced. And her family, after he had left, had burned all of the letters, and he just gave up on that. And so 50 years later, they finally reunited just a few days ago. But it turns out, he's still married. He has a wife in Ohio, and it's a failing marriage, which I guess I understand. So there's a lot that's going on here that doesn't quite piece together. I'm not sure what exactly it means that they lost touch, or that he could not come back as promised, or what happened between them back then, but I do know that he apologized to her, and so there must have been some way, even back then, to be able to find her. It's odd that he would only have the name of the club and the post without knowing where her family lived and everything. So there's stuff that doesn't add up. But again, as in my disclaimer at the beginning, I would say that, we don't really know what happened between them. And it could just be I'm being cynical or something. But the other thing, the main thing that I think about when considering this is that suppose it had been wartime, if I had been in his position, I mean, I wouldn't have been there to begin with anyway. And I wouldn't have felt right being with a local knowing that I was there killing them. It's the American war. That's what it was. This was the American war. And I've thought about it. I've considered it. If I had been drafted at that time, I would have said, lock me up, put me in jail, or I would have gone to Canada or something. That's one thing I am 100% about is I'm anti-war. And I've had to turn down very lucrative offers in the Middle East, jobs where I could have made fortunes, much bigger money than I could ever expect to make teaching English in Asia or elsewhere, or certainly in America, because they were affiliated with the military. You know, I didn't want to work for a military base. I could never have that on my conscience. And if for some reason a war were to break out again, and well, I guess I'm getting on the older side now, but if I had ever been drafted, you know, I would have gladly gone straight to jail. You know, I'd rather spend 3 years in jail than 3 months on the battlefield, even if I wasn't seeing combat, because I just see it as morally wrong. Anyone who does get drafted or does get forced to go into the military, I mean, I'm sorry, but that's your moral duty, is not to fight. And there was no reason for us to be in Vietnam. Maybe you can make a case for Nazi Germany, the Holocaust or something, but I don't know. Pacifism is a radical notion, but it's something I believe in. And so I would have never been in this situation. I would have spent my time during Vietnam in jail, just as I refused to go fight people in Iraq over that phony, stupid war, which was called our next Vietnam, our next American war. War is terrible. Nobody should fight. If they threw a war and nobody came, then there wouldn't be any of that. And it's an outmoded, barbaric thing. It's something that we're losing. It's something that we need to leave in the dustbin of the past. And part of what makes me so angry still about the American war is that it happened so close to my lifespan, and it happened to my parents' generation. And I just can't imagine how horrible that must have been. My father was drafted, in fact, but they sent him to England instead of Vietnam. He loves the military now. I'm just kidding. He hates the military. Maybe that's part of where I get my prejudice. But good. I mean, I'm glad this couple found each other. But again, you know, he's married. This Ken guy is still married. It's a failing marriage, and we're not sure what the future is. I hope things go well for them. But for anyone who's fawning over this completely, at least have some critical sense that any American who was here, you know, shouldn't have been here. And any American who was here has the blood of Vietnamese on his hands. Over and out.